You played me. That's what this is about.
I played you! Clara is as much your fault. So is your niece. That's why you sent your family away, right? They know what you are. You play a beautiful game, but sometimes you still lose.
You know, Damien might be a jackass, but I can't help thinking he has a point here. Given the massive surplus of open world experiences floating around in the video game industry these days, it's inevitable that some games will be overlooked or forgotten. Watch Dogs seems to be one of those games. Don't get me wrong, this game certainly has its fans, and I think justifiably so for the most part, but it's certainly not a household name. I often ask people what they think about this game, only for them to tell me they've never even heard of it. This is something I find ironic given how much hype surrounded this game before its release. There was plenty of excitement when it was first announced, but it didn't really live up to expectations. If I had to pin down one reason, it would probably be the compromises Ubisoft eventually made in the graphics department. This game still looks and runs smoothly, at least for me, but the final product doesn't look nearly as good as the trailers and marketing made it appear. I suppose you could chalk this up to an unhealthy obsession with graphical quality in video games, and while I don't think you would be entirely wrong to do that, at the end of the day the product we were shown wasn't what we got, and I can see why that might upset some people. As for why I cared enough about this game to give it a shot, simply put, I heard it was an experience similar to Grand Theft Auto. Or, to be more blunt, a GTA clone. Some people are very quick to label any third-person shooter with a semblance of an open world as just a game that's trying to imitate Grand Theft Auto. After playing this game myself, twice in fact, I certainly don't think it's fair to call Watch Dogs a GTA clone, although there are definitely some shared qualities there. But now to answer the question you're actually here for. What can Watch Dogs offer you? Is this an experience you should spend money on? Will I ever find a way to upload these videos faster? If you're interested in any of that, keep watching and hopefully I'll give you what you're looking for. I normally start with the story when I review games, but this time I'm going to do it a bit differently. We're going to tackle the open world first this time since there are a few things that need to be said about it. But without any more rambling, let's get into the review. Since the core design philosophy of the game is dependent on the city of Chicago being a fun location to explore, it's only fair we give the open world itself some attention. Ubisoft decided against a traditional mission-to-mission structure for Watch Dogs, which isn't really a surprise given Ubisoft also made the Assassin's Creed games. But to determine if the open world of Watch Dogs holds its weight, we need to answer one key question. Does the open world actually feel like an open world? This might seem like a dumb question at face value, but it's more important than you think. Many open world games have a huge environment for players to explore, but they don't actually offer any activities or events to grab the player's attention. At least, not many good ones. Does Watch Dogs fall into this trap? Well, I'd say yes and no. On one hand, the game definitely gets the little things right concerning what makes a player feel involved in an open world. If you point a gun directly in someone's face, they'll cower and run away from you. If you crouch behind cover in a public area, civilians will comment about how stupid you look, saying things such as, "It's not a playground," or "I guess they let the crazies out today."
It's not a playground, always one in the crowd, you know?
It's a little thing, but it's something you don't really notice until it's not there. You can also listen in on conversations by hacking the cell phones of passers-by, and while some of the conversations are just straight up stupid, others are quite relatable to the everyday person's struggle.
God, it stained my shirt. They're gonna tow my car.
Did the paramedics check you out?
Not yet. They're still trying to get the other guy out. God, this is my fault.
Quiet, man. Don't let him hear you say that.
But it was. I was texting Mom and I wasn't paying attention.
I don't have any money.
But this is a good deal. It's a steal.
A steal from me.
What's that supposed to mean? I was only asking for a loan. I'm not trying to steal from you. Why are you such an asshole?
You can even hack into their residences and observe them directly without them having any knowledge of your presence, which is totally not creepy at all.
Ooh, I guess that's yummy. Nice and yummy.
You also have the option to visit numerous city hotspots as you explore that teach you more about the history and relevant locations of Chicago, which is a really neat addition if you like that sort of thing. On top of that, you can engage in several side activities such as drinking, chess, testing your eyes at shell games, or testing your luck with a game of poker. Not every single one of these activities is my cup of tea, mind you. I don't drink personally, and I don't even know how to play poker, but still, it's there if you want it. The activities aren't going to appeal to literally every single person who plays the game. The actual gameplay that accompanies these mini-games can be pretty rudimentary though, so it might not exactly hook you in that sense. The game also offers a day and night system with dynamic weather patterns, which is anything but new for video games, but it's still appreciated, especially since the weather often changes to match the tone of what's going on in the story at a particular moment. Oh, we're not talking about the story yet. I'd say the open world is appropriately sized as well. It's big enough that locations are unique and distinct from one another, but not so big it takes forever to get around. There are higher income neighborhoods as well as the more rundown areas. You've also got some industrial areas and even the underdeveloped areas for the people who don't exactly enjoy the city lifestyle. And if you're tired of driving around everywhere, you can use fast travel to keep the pace going. In terms of getting the little details down, Watch Dogs does pretty well. Not the best I've ever seen, but it's more than enough to call it a solid experience. When you start combining those details into a bigger picture though, that's where things get a bit more dicey. Earlier I mentioned this is a Ubisoft game, and if you're familiar with Ubisoft, you know the design strategies the developers have become famous for, or infamous for, depending on who you ask. That's right, I'm talking about those f***ing CTOS towers. Throughout the game, Aiden uses his access to CTOS to hack into and influence numerous electronic systems throughout Chicago. More on the hacking itself in the gameplay portion, but for now, all you need to know is a significant portion of the side content is locked behind these CTOS towers. How do you unlock the towers? Easy. Just travel across the entire map and spend hours trying to solve stupid climbing puzzles that aren't fun or thought-provoking. I'm not going to cut the game much slack on this. This is a bad way to design an open world game. Ubisoft's obsession with this design strategy is the biggest reason I don't care for the Assassin's Creed games. It causes the player to spend less time interacting with the game world itself and more time interacting with waypoint markers and hacking puzzles that are way more complicated and irritating than they need to be. Why not make side activities available when the player gets within a certain distance or when certain missions have been completed? This would allow the player to have something to look forward to as the narrative unfolds. But instead, the devs opted for the classic, let's make the player do side quests to unlock other side quests. It wastes the player's time without adding anything to compensate, and is the biggest reason why exploring the open world in this game can be an absolute chore sometimes. Sure, I want to go explore and play some side quests, but not if I have to go through all this annoying bull just to unlock them. I'd rather just play the main story and be done with it. And some of these towers have to be unlocked to progress the main story, so it's not like you can just avoid them altogether. You are going to put up with this dumb shit to some extent, whether you want to or not. The open world is full of activities to try out, and the dynamic NPC behavior really adds to the immersion. I just wish Ubisoft had the guts to move away from this old, tired way of producing an open world game, especially when it actively clashes with other parts of the game that would have been a lot more enjoyable without it. It forces exploration onto the player rather than allowing it to occur naturally. The open world pulled me into the experience further multiple times, and I honestly think its problems wouldn't have been too difficult to fix compared to some of the other issues the game has. But who exactly do you explore this open world as? Well, that would be Aiden Pierce. You know, this guy. I think it's about time we get into his story. The story kicks off with Aiden attempting to rob the Merlot Hotel with his associate Damien Branks. The job is going well until another hacker enters the system, resulting in the job getting blown. Fixers discover Aiden and Damien's identities soon after, and hitman Maurice Vega is ordered to kill Aiden for his role in the job. But that doesn't go as planned for Maurice. He tried to kill Aiden in a drive-by shooting, but instead killed his 6-year-old niece Lena. Aiden interrogates Maurice to figure out who ordered the hit, but Maurice refuses to talk. Aiden links up with Jordy, a fixer he hired to find Maurice, and he causes a blackout to escape the area as the cops swarm in. The next day, Aiden visits his sister Nikki to celebrate her son Jackson's birthday. It's an awkward meeting since it's the first time Aiden's been around since Lena's death, but something tells me this family is used to awkward moments. The party is interrupted when a man calls Nikki's phone and threatens her, causing Aiden to request help from fellow hacker Bad Boy 17 to trace the signal back to the original point of the call. In the meantime, Jordy gets Aiden to be a getaway driver for a job gone wrong. He takes the criminal to the drop-off point only to discover he works for Lucky Quinn, an incredibly rich man who also happens to be one of the most infamous gangsters in Chicago. Quinn kills the criminal in retaliation for the failed job, and Aiden doesn't intervene for the sake of not creating more problems for himself than he already has. Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts. Aiden then meets with Bad Boy 17, who's actually a bad girl named Clara. She gives Aiden a collection of system keys to hack into CTOS and manipulate it from the inside. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned CTOS yet, have I? Well, just think of it as a really big network used to intrude on citizens' privacy that can also be used to manipulate the city's infrastructure. CTOS is owned by a company called Bloom, but more on that later. Aiden reaches the source of the call, but all he finds is a hotline to his former partner and mentor, Damien. Turns out Damien harassed Aiden's sister to get his attention since he wants Aiden's help to find the second hacker associated with a failed job at the Merlot. Aiden says no since he doesn't really need Damien's help due to having Clara, and he isn't eager to work with Damien again due to his role in Lena's death. Aiden visits Lena's grave, prompting a flashback with Aiden and Nikki, in which Nikki tells Aiden to stop chasing the men responsible for Lena's death since that will only bring more hardship onto their family. But since we've already seen how things play out in the present, we know that attempt fell flat on its face. But Aiden has bigger things to worry about anyway, since a survivor who witnessed some of his crimes at the stadium earlier is preparing to give up his identity to the police, so he gets himself arrested to find the witness inside the prison and blackmail him into staying quiet. Aiden meets with Damien again in hopes of tricking him into revealing what he knows about the failed Merlot job, but this time Damien has an ace up his sleeve. He has Aiden's sister Nikki kidnapped to force Aiden to help him find the second hacker with the threat of killing Nikki if he doesn't cooperate. Aiden narrowly saves Jackson from being captured by fixers and sends him to stay with his psychologist Yolanda while Aiden works to find Nikki. I'm not really convinced a doctor would just agree to take in a child on such short notice like this, but if it's for the sake of the plot, then whatever, I guess. Aiden calls Clara to his hideout for help tracking the IP address Damien gave him, but Clara becomes apprehensive and attempts to leave after learning Damien is involved. Before she can leave though, fixers take advantage of Aiden's intrusion to attack his hideout. He manages to escape, but loses all of his equipment in the process. Fortunately, Clara knows of a location called The Bunker, which is believed to be the place of origin for CTOS, along with housing an extremely strong base of operations for hackers. Aiden tracks down former CTOS employee Tobias and beats the out of him, persuades him into handing over access to the bunker. Tobias pretty much disappears after that, although the part where he flips the poker table was kind of cool. Inside the bunker, Clara tracks the IP address to a location in the Rossi Fremont district. The building is run by a stick-up-his-ass gangster named Iraq who attempts to demonstrate how tough he is by killing one of his associates for making a joke. I have never understood this writing cliche. It's always been stupid, and this is no exception. Pretty hard to keep employees when you're constantly killing them for the dumbest reasons. The Rossi Fremont building is too heavily guarded for Aiden to get inside himself, so he blackmails a gang member nicknamed Bedbug into getting the information for him. He does so by recording a conversation in which Bedbug admits he helped Iraq bury a bunch of bodies after they murdered members of a rival gang.
Remember when Fly and his crew disappeared? Yeah, they stepped out of line. Iraq put them down himself. I know, because I helped him bury the bodies.
Yeah, this guy was actually stupid enough to talk about his past murders in a public, unsecured location like this. It's not quite that simple though, since Iraq has already deemed Bedbug a loose end and places a kill order on him due to his past f***ups. Aiden reaches the ambush spot first and takes out Iraq's men, that allows Bedbug to take the credit so he can get back in Iraq's good graces. He then springs his trap and makes Bedbug look like the biggest dumb in Chicago in the process.
You're gonna be my eyes and ears inside Rossi Fremont.
No, wait, man, Iraq would kill me.
Yeah, what will he do when I send him everything I've got? You wanna see more?
No. Just erase this shit, please.
Erase this shit, please. Erase this shit, please.
Bedbug tells Aiden he can find Iraq at a private auction run by Lucky Quinn, which works out since Aiden needs a copy of Iraq's dog tags to get past the encryption on the door in Rossi Fremont. He attends the auction only to discover the auction isn't an auction at all, but is actually a human trafficking ring. I'm not gonna lie, seeing this part made me sick to my stomach. Watching those women get sold off like they were nothing really pissed me off. I'm not gonna show footage of it for the sake of not violating YouTube's highly contentious TOS policies, but just know that this part of the story definitely got to me. Especially since it's an unfortunate reflection of how many women in our society are treated. Was that the point of this section? I'm not sure, but that's what I took from it. But let's move on to the rest of the story. Aiden clones Iraq's tags but has to fight his way out after Quinn's men catch on to his act. But he doesn't have much time to rest since Jackson ran away from Yolanda in a desperate attempt to find his mom, and Aiden rushes to locate him before he's kidnapped or worse. Aiden rescues Jackson, but Jackson is hesitant to go with him since he witnessed Aiden murder a large number of men through the cameras in the security room. Aiden starts to question if he has any real justification for his actions up to this point, or if he's just another murderer akin to every other man he's killed.
Look on Jack's face. What did I do? I killed every one of them. What was I thinking? That's not who I am. Is it?
Personally, I think it's closer to the latter, but your thoughts may vary. Aiden takes Jackson back to Yolanda, but she threatens to call the police if Nikki doesn't show up soon, so the clock is ticking fast for dear Aiden. Aiden guides Bedbug to Rossi Fremont's server room, but Iraq busts in before Bedbug can finish downloading the data. Iraq is pissed and nearly kills Bedbug, but Bedbug somehow miraculously makes it out of the building alive. Seriously, how did he get out? One moment he's at gunpoint about to get thrown out of a window, and the next he's just fine. The game never explains this. Did Iraq let him go after discovering he was blackmailed? I doubt it. This seems to be a pretty clear-cut case of bad writing, since there's no logical way Bedbug could have survived this situation, and it's just a massive plot hole. I don't even know why the writers went out of their way to keep him alive, since his role in the story was basically over at this point, so why not just kill him off? It might have been a last-ditch attempt to avoid putting Aiden into a serious moral crossroads due to his plan getting Bedbug killed, but given everything Aiden has done up to this point in the story, that doesn't really make sense. I actually like this story a lot overall, but I'm not going to make excuses for terrible writing like this. This part of the story was not thought out well, and it should have been changed. But I digress, so let's move on. Even though Bedbug was caught, Aiden got enough data from Rossi Fremont to learn Iraq has a server full of blackmail and loads of people in the city, ranging from police chiefs to business execs. But Clara doesn't have the skill necessary to decrypt the information, so Aiden needs to track down Raymond Kenny, the CTOS developer who created the encryption. He eventually tracks Kenny to a bar in the outskirts of the city and has a brief struggle with him before Kenny tases him into the Shadow Realm.
Hello, Ray.
I said, keep your voice.
After learning of Lena's death, Kenny agrees to help Aiden, but only if he breaks into Bloom headquarters to erase Kenny's biometrics from their system, along with placing spywork into their network. While inside Bloom HQ, Aiden eavesdrops on a meeting between Damien and Charlotte Gardner, the director of public relations at Bloom. Damien gives up Raymond Kenny's location in exchange for access to CTOS, so Aiden has to haul to save Kenny from Bloom's fixers. The duo takes advantage of Kenny's booby traps to escape Bloom's ambush and get back to the bunker. But Kenny nearly walks out after learning Aiden's situation is more screwed up than he let on. Clara saves the day by convincing Kenny to stay, although she doesn't really say anything beyond, "Please stay, we need you."
Hey.
need your expertise. The server is using your encryption. We need Raymond Kenny.
So I'm not really sure why Kenny was convinced by this. Aiden fights his way back into Rossi Fremont to obtain the rest of the data from Iraq's server, but this creates a significant issue with the narrative. Earlier in the game, Rossi Fremont is described as being a fortress so well defended that Aiden couldn't possibly succeed in a frontal assault.
I don't see how you could get on the compound. Never mind near that room.
But here, Aiden shoots his way into Rossi Fremont like it's nothing. If he could do that, why did he bother with the whole blackmailing bedbug thing? Why didn't he just go in and get the information himself to begin with? This just feels like padding that forces the player to spend another mission in Rossi Fremont despite several missions already being dedicated to this location. I guess the story might have been written this way to give Aiden a reason to track down Raymond Kenny, but he could have easily done that after getting the information from Rossi Fremont the first time. Again, this is another example of bad writing. Aiden gets the data but runs into Iraq on the way out and learns he was the second hacker inside the Merlot. He chases Iraq through the building and eventually puts one between his eyes. I think I was supposed to feel a much bigger sense of satisfaction from killing Iraq than I actually did. Aiden didn't go into Rossi Fremont to kill Iraq, he went there to get the data from his server. He only kills Iraq because he happened to run into Iraq while making his escape. So Aiden isn't really earning any hero points for this one. Aiden returns to the bunker to look through the decrypted data, only for another hacker called Default to break into the system and steal the information. Default sent a video to Aiden showing Clara was the one who gave up his name to the Fixers, which ultimately resulted in Lena's death. This explains why she attempted to back out of helping Aiden earlier once she heard Damien's name in the hotel. Aiden is naturally pissed, but can't think about it too long since he still has to deal with Damien. He knows Damien can't afford to kill Nikki at this point since Damien made a deal with Bloom to give up Iraq's data, meaning if Aiden doesn't give him the data, Damien will be hunted down by Fixers. Damien throws a counterpunch though by broadcasting Aiden's face to every big screen in Chicago, forcing Aiden to flee the scene in a hurry. Although this doesn't make much sense because if Aiden gets caught by the police, Damien has no way of getting the data, but oh well, I guess Damien just wanted to flex or some shit. With Kenny's help, Aiden recovers the data Default stole and eventually kills him after a wild goose chase through a nightclub. Similar to Iraq, Default is a villain whose death could have been written better. I mean, why did Default leave a huge trail of evidence leading Aiden straight to him? I understand he's an arrogant hacker who likes showing off his skills, but it's like he wanted Aiden to come kill him. There's being cocky and then there's being suicidal. All I'm saying is there's a reason Default's death got retconned for the DLC. Meanwhile, Kenny discovers Nikki's location using muffled audio from a call between her and Aiden, so Aiden heads over there to rescue her. Nikki does pop a guy in cold blood on the way out, and listening to her agonize over the guilt of that is pretty interesting, although it gets pretty annoying listening to her say the same dialogue over and over again. Aiden helps Nikki and Jackson leave town since his crimes have made him too big a target and his family will always be in danger as long as they're around him. He says his goodbyes and heads back into town to finish things. He gets a tip from Kenny that Quinn was the one who ordered the hit on his family, which is really obvious when you think about it. I mean, Aiden and Damien stole from the Merlot, a hotel owned by Lucky Quinn. This might have been a situation where the writers tried to leave clues as to who the true culprit was in hopes the player would figure it out before it's actually revealed, and if that was the case, I'd say they did a pretty good job with it. Aiden fights his way into Quinn's hotel and kills him by hacking into his pacemaker, but before Quinn dies, he reveals he targeted Aiden due to a video showing newly elected Chicago Mayor Rushmore murdering his primary competitor Rose Washington, with Quinn believing Aiden hacked into the Merlot to gain access to the video. Stupid question coming. If Lucky Quinn knew this video existed, why didn't he, destroy it? Why keep it locked away in a server where someone could potentially find it? Anyway, Damien calls Aiden shortly after, telling him Clara attempted to give herself up in exchange for Nikki, and that Quinn sent Fixers to kill Clara due to her being a loose end. Clara visits Lena's grave out of guilt for her role in Lena's death, and the Fixers show up and kill Clara before Aiden can get there. On a side note, how the f did Clara not see these guys approaching? I get she was looking down, but these guys weren't exactly doing a great job of concealing themselves. Aiden regretfully looks upon Clara's corpse and listens to a voicemail she left for him in which she owned her role in Lena's death and stated she hoped to atone for it. Aiden chooses to make the information he found in Iraq's server available to the public, resulting in much of the city's corruption being exposed, including the murder of Rose Washington. This pisses off Damien since he now has nothing to give Bloom, so he attempts to kill Aiden with his newfound access to CTOS. I'm not exactly sure how Damien gained access to CTOS, by the way. He didn't get it from Bloom since he never sold them the data, and he obviously didn't get it from Aiden. It's possible Clara gave it to him as a means of trying to bargain for Nikki's life, but the game never explicitly says that, so I'm gonna call bullshit. With Kenny's help, Aiden causes a citywide blackout to cut off Damien's access to CTOS, and he travels to the city's lighthouse to confront Damien for the last time. He corners Damien, but Jordy shows up out of nowhere with plans to kill them both and claim the bounties for himself. Aiden blows up the lighthouse to create a distraction, allowing him to throw Jordy over the edge and shoot Damien. After the credits, it's revealed Jordy survived, and he calls Aiden to tell him Maurice's location. You're then given the choice to kill Maurice or let him live. On my first playthrough I chose to let him live, but this time I chose to pop his ass because honestly that's what he deserved. Granted, Aiden probably deserves the same, at least in my eyes. Some people just can't help viewing the protagonist as an infallible hero regardless of what they actually do in the story. I've seen posts online of people defending Maurice for killing Lena because he was just the middleman in the situation. Personally, I think that's a load of horseshit. Regardless of whether Maurice was ordered to or not, he's the one who pulled the trigger, so he is responsible. And honestly, that's the most tragic thing about this story to me. There's no one person responsible for Lena's death. Maurice is responsible because he pulled the trigger. Lucky Quinn is responsible because he ordered it. Damien is responsible because he didn't stick to the plan during the robbery, which led to his and Aiden's identities being discovered. And Aiden is responsible because he got involved in this lifestyle in the first place. Yeah guys, Aiden bears responsibility for his niece's death. When you live a lifestyle built upon stealing from people with far more money and connections than you have, it's only a matter of time before someone strikes back against you. For Aiden, that person was Lucky Quinn, and the price was his niece's life. Aiden knew his illegal activities could jeopardize his family, and he continued down that path, so he is also responsible. Overall, I really enjoy this game's story. I like the decision to introduce more serious themes and give them the attention they deserve without simultaneously making a joke out of everything. The biggest example is the trafficking ring, but there are others too. I know many people aren't a fan of Aiden as a protagonist, but I really enjoyed seeing the journey through his eyes. He's not the worst guy in the world, but he's certainly no hero either, despite the game occasionally trying to convince you otherwise. He's not above using people to get what he wants, even if they never actually wronged him, but his struggle is still relatable to the average person in many ways, so I'd say it balances out. I also enjoyed other characters including Damien, Lucky Quinn, and Raymond Kenny. I already talked about my issues with Iraq in default, so I'll just say I wasn't the biggest fan of either one. Most of the minor characters are pretty good too, but I won't touch on every single one. Watch Dogs has a mostly enjoyable narrative to me. It has quite a few head-scratching moments in terms of writing quality, but it had enough interesting and tense situations to keep me interested the whole way through. And the ending was really satisfying to me when Aiden kills Damien at the lighthouse, then agonizes over whether or not to kill Maurice. It made all the build-up throughout the course of the game feel worth it. At the core, the gameplay of Watch Dogs can be broken up into 4 main categories: combat, hacking, stealth, and traversal. There's obviously some overlap between these, but each one has its unique qualities nonetheless. Let's start with the combat, or to be more accurate, the shooting, since that's what over 90% of the combat is in this game. Granted, that's not a bad thing on its own, and I find the shooting mechanics to be pretty good in this game, all things considered. Pretty much every weapon type you've seen before makes an appearance in some form, be it pistols, SMGs, rifles, shotguns, snipers, and even launchers. Aiden also gains access to grenades and even IEDs as you progress through the game, so you certainly won't be lacking in options to take down enemies. The classic weapon balancing methods are at work here, such as giving higher damage weapons lower rates of fire, or giving that 1200 RPM SMG a really high recoil rate. Even the best weapons in the game aren't efficient at everything, so you're gonna have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice at some point. But regardless of which weapon you choose, you aren't gonna be suffering through a load of unfair gunfights assuming you aren't playing on realistic difficulty. Most enemies can be put down in 3 shots or less, even with a not very powerful gun. And headshots almost always kill an enemy instantly, with the only exceptions being the armored foes that can sometimes take 1 extra shot courtesy of their helmets, and the goddamn juggernauts. I don't know if it's just me, but I think juggernaut-style enemies are fairly overused, not just in this game, but in shooter games overall. They take way too many shots to kill, they don't flinch at any incoming damage that isn't a massive explosion, and in this game in particular, you often have to face them in smaller confined areas where you have fewer options. It's not the worst thing in the world though, since you can make good use of Aiden's hacking abilities to tip the scales in your favor, or at least even the playing field. Speaking of the hacking, I guess we should cover that, huh? After all, the hacking is the game feature that got so many people excited for the game's release all those years ago. By making use of his trusty cellular device, Aiden can hack into electronic systems throughout the city and manipulate environments or situations to his advantage. He can hack into camera systems to scout enemy strongholds before entering, or use them to follow signals back to their point of origin to unlock areas that would otherwise be inaccessible. But the hacking mechanics go way beyond just those things. Aiden can also hack explosives to detonate them from a distance, allowing you to score easy kills if you blow them up while an enemy is nearby. He can also activate machinery such as bridges or forklifts to confuse enemies, and even hack their communications to temporarily deafen them, opening them up for an easy finishing move. He can even disable an enemy's ability to call reinforcements, so you don't have to worry about that second wave of assholes showing up if you get spotted. Outside of combat, you can scan citizens throughout the city to learn information about them, including their names, jobs, hobbies, and even their criminal records. It's a nice addition, but you might find yourself learning some information you didn't really want to know if you scan enough people. This is also the easiest way to earn money in the game by far. One push of a button and you're a few $1,000s richer, and it is oh so sweet. But those are just the things you can do on foot. Aiden also has access to hacks while driving, allowing you to change traffic lights to cause advantageous accidents, or manipulate city infrastructure to aid your escape from the police. Speaking of the police, I really like the way the game handles them. Unlike many other games, the police don't immediately start chasing you the instant you commit a crime. In most cases, someone has to actually report your crime before they start searching for you, which is a lot more realistic. Even when the police do start searching for you, they won't have access to your exact location on the spot. They have to search for Aiden's location using CTOS, and if you manage to avoid them long enough, they'll just stop chasing you altogether, allowing you to avoid a prolonged chase sequence. On top of that, you can craft jam comms to disrupt the police search and make it harder for them to locate you. The police system of Watch Dogs has more complexity than other similar games. It rewards the player for outsmarting the police while punishing the player for failing to do so, as opposed to requiring the player to just mow over the police with brute force all the time. It's much more immersive than the police just magically knowing your location the second you commit a crime and teleporting to your location in the span of 10 seconds. Getting back on track though, the hacking is the best part of the gameplay in my view, and what really separates this game from being just another generic third-person shooter, or a GTA clone as some would put it. If you properly observe the environments around you and plan out your decisions, you can dominate just about every encounter in the game. You can win most gunfights just by shooting if you really want to go that route, but some of the encounters get pretty brutal in terms of the number of enemies the game throws at you, so if you don't use hacks to stay ahead of them or at least thin the herd before you go loud, you're going to have a few frustrating moments, especially near the end of the game when the difficulty and complexity of those encounters increase. Speaking of thinning the herd, it's about time to cover the stealth mechanics. Stealth itself is still going to be your best friend upon entering a new area. The enemies are usually not aware of your presence initially, so you can take advantage of that to slowly snap their necks one by one like the hardened vigilante you are. You're given a silenced pistol early in the game, so you're never lacking a method for eliminating enemies from a safe distance. You can also take them down with a silent melee attack if you approach from behind, but most of the time that's just the inferior option. Quick and decisive headshots are your friend here as opposed to prolonged gunfights where you might not have the cover or tactical edge to survive without a lot of grief. This is a good time to mention Aiden's focus ability. By pushing the right stick down, you can activate this ability to slow down time and give yourself a bigger window to execute actions. The focus ability itself can be upgraded using the skill tree to slow down time even further, and you can temporarily increase the max duration of focus by eating food from certain restaurants in the city. For me, the best application of focus is slowing down time to nail headshots on unaware enemies. I didn't really use it too much in active combat encounters, although I'm sure it's still useful for that type of thing. I don't really like using focus in cars though. It makes the handling easier while it's active, but once you turn it off, your car will swing around quickly as if all its momentum was stored up and released at one time. It caused me to crash into more often than not, so I prefer to only use it on foot. While we're on the topic of vehicles though, I should point out this game has a rather large and diverse selection of them. You've got the typical budget cars, but you've also got sports cars, muscle cars, heavy vehicles, motorcycles, etc. While some vehicles definitely handle better than others and are more fun to drive as a result, finding a vehicle isn't normally a time-consuming task. And if you can't spot a vehicle you're interested in, you can use your smartphone to call a mechanic and have a car immediately delivered to your location. And I really mean immediately. That spawns on the next road over. It's really convenient actually. Granted, you can't spawn literally any vehicle you want. You can only spawn a vehicle if you've driven it at least once already, but once you accumulate some funds, you can buy vehicles, and some others can even be unlocked by completing a certain number of side missions. This is also true for the weapons, although I'd argue the ones you get in the game world itself are more than enough. This game also sports heavily destructible environments, so you can ram through pretty much all the time, and it's really fun to mess around with your surroundings to see what you can get away with. It adds a nice dimension of chaos to the gameplay and exploration. Now that we've covered the core game mechanics, it's time to move on to the mission design. I can confidently say this game has some extremely creative mission design throughout. The first mission of the game has you escaping a jam-packed baseball stadium with the cops hot on your tail after you've interrogated a man and killed several others. The fact Aiden has to initiate a building-wide blackout to escape is not only incredibly thrilling to play through along with being a great introduction to the game, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to the he gets into after that. Sneaking past the cops the panicky fugitive all while checking your map to plan your route so you don't drive straight into a police roadblock is pretty interesting, and I don't think this particular mission type is overused. There is one I do think is overused, but we'll get to that in a bit. My favorite mission design in the whole game might be the prison break-in. Not only do you have to reach the prisoner without getting seen by any of the guards, you also can't take anyone down since their hidden cameras will alert the others to your whereabouts. This mission really tests your ability to use cameras and plan your route and your understanding of enemy sightlines. Although the enemy sightlines in this game don't always function as they should. There will be times you don't get spotted by an enemy even though you really should have been, or vice versa. It happened quite a few times, but not enough for me to consider it a significant problem. Setting up the ambush to kill Iraq's men was also fun since the game gives you plenty of options, so you should have no issues tricking the enemies into walking into whatever traps you set up for them. Attending Lucky Quinn's auction was interesting as well, along with breaking into Bloom's headquarters. Finding my way through the nightclub to get to default was also pretty entertaining, aforementioned plot stupidity aside. I wish I could say every mission in the game was this fun, but that's unfortunately not true. For as many unique and memorable missions this game has, it also reuses some mechanics way too many times. One obvious example is the whole guiding the NPC to the exit through the cameras bull. You have to do this at least 4 times, and it gets twice as boring every time it shows up. And if the NPC you're guiding gets spotted by an enemy, get ready to lose a hefty amount of progress along with having to listen to the same lines of dialogue playing over and over and over again.
I think he was still breathing. I think he was still breathing. I think he was still breathing.
It gets really damn annoying. Also, there are a few too many missions that boil down to track the signal or some equivalent of that. Most missions like that only exist to set up a later one that's much better. And while the hacking works well within the game world itself, I have absolutely nothing good to say about these stupid hacking minigames that are rampant throughout the game. They're not hard, they're just unbelievably bland and they appear way too frequently. Oddly enough, the final mission of the game is a huge combination of the game's best and worst mission design. It really possesses a scale that a final mission should have, given all the chaos you have to fight your way through to eventually reach Damien. At the same time, you have to put up with so much to the point it can become incredibly overwhelming and the odds can seem unfairly stacked against you. You have to tackle hordes of police chasing you across town, civilians blocking the road with their cars, Damien destroying the city with CTOS, visual distortions periodically appearing on your screen, and a up HUD that doesn't actually show you useful information. It just gets to be too much. I love the scale of the final mission, but the difficulty was ramped up to an almost unbearable level to accommodate it. Still though, tossing Jordy's traitorous off that lighthouse and popping Damien did make me feel accomplished by the end. While we're on the topic of things I don't like, we need to touch on a big problem this game has. Even bigger than the occasionally repetitive mission design. I am really not a fan of the way this game handles enemy spawns. Enemies often spawn too close to your location, giving you little or no time to actually figure out how to meet them. The enemies are on you in 5 seconds or less, so if you trigger them to spawn while you're in an exposed position, you're probably going to get eaten alive. I think this becomes a bigger problem the farther you advance into the game, courtesy of the larger numbers of enemies you face, along with the secondary threats you have to pay attention to while fighting those enemies. The shootout on the rooftop of the Merlot Hotel is a really good example of this. When the helicopter spawns, it spawns so close I don't have enough time to find cover and avoid the sniper. The spawns definitely needed some extra work, and they were the source of a lot of my late game frustration. But to circle back to the mission design, I do think it's mostly good when you look at the whole picture. Well, I think that regarding the main story missions. The side missions, though, tend to fall more on the bland side collectively. Taking down gang hideouts and criminal convoys is only fun the first couple of times, after which it just becomes busy work, especially since the same handful of tactics work every single time. This is a good opportunity to highlight the stupidity of the distinction between taking down an enemy and knocking one down. In some cases, Aiden has to take down the enemy, meaning kill them, so you can mostly play as normal. But in the missions requiring a knockdown, you can kill every enemy in the area except for the ones the game tells you you're not allowed to kill. Why bother with the distinction at all? If it's to push the idea that not all the criminals Aiden takes down are worthy of death, then why is it acceptable to kill every other enemy in the area? It's dumb. I know the devs wanted players to think through these engagements sometimes instead of just mindlessly mowing down enemies, but from a logic standpoint, it just doesn't make much sense. As far as the investigations are concerned, I didn't really bother with those. It was a bit sad to see the conclusion to the human trafficking plot point get relegated to a side mission like that. Lastly, I think this game could have used a bit more time in the quality assurance department. The most noteworthy example is when Aiden rescues Nikki near the end of the game. During this mission, Nikki will not move from this spot no matter what you do, even if Aiden is standing directly next to her. It's worth noting you start the sequence with control of the cameras and not Aiden himself. The mission is designed for you to guide Nikki to the exit using the cameras, but I found it way easier to just exit the cameras and kill everyone. But even after doing that, Nikki still would not move from this spot. I had to re-enter the camera system and guide her through an area with no enemies or threats whatsoever before the game would allow me to continue. This was probably just the result of some developer oversight, but I still found it really annoying, especially since this took me like 4 attempts. A few months of extra development would have really helped iron out these kinds of issues. There's a lot of depth to the gameplay of Watch Dogs, and I really enjoyed the challenges the game threw at me. There are some things that pissed me off for sure, but the mechanics complement each other well, and once you get the hang of everything, you can become really efficient at tackling your objectives. It has more to offer than just being another third-person shooter game. Although this game certainly didn't meet the hype established before its release, I still think it's a good game. The story has a great tone and plenty of memorable events, but I won't deny the writing quality falls short on more than one occasion. The presentation is really well done, and the gameplay is very immersive despite having some unfair enemy spawns and a few cases of dull mission design. Watch Dogs gets a 7.75 out of 10. I can comfortably recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of the action-adventure genre, but it's definitely not without its faults. In some ways, I consider this game better than others in the genre that get way more praise, including GTA 5. The story of Aiden Pierce is definitely worth experiencing.